Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
Lawson, there are times when, as a dad, things are just completely smooth. I think the word would be placid. It's like there's this glassy pond, and if you were to throw a rock in it, you could see ripples for days because it's so easy. And it's just like we're floating down a lazy river. What would the lazy river sound like? The pond that's only interrupted by the calm rising and falling of my breathing.
More like maybe some frogs in the distance and some birds chirping.
I feel it's almost like a Disney story is about to break out, and you and I should start singing, Lawson. That would be fantastic. But it's like calm. And I'm half kidding, but there are times when, as a dad, life is relatively stable and relatively calm. However, that doesn't describe the vast majority of my days as a dad.
It's usually pretty crazy and wild. It's usually like you're going down not a lazy river.
It's like we're going down Class 5 rapids with our whole family in the boat, and we're just trying to keep the 2-year-old from falling into the river. That's usually what it's like. It's a little more like that. And my theory would be is we like to do podcasts occasionally where we use some sound effects to try to like get you in the mood, to get you understand the topic. And so we're going to talk about today on the show this idea between where are you in your kind of reaction to the rapids? Because generally speaking, I don't know about you, man, you can push back, but you know, they rate rapids class 1 to 5, and 5 is like, you're going to die. And 1 is like, it's, you know, pretty easy. A kid could do it. And so somewhere in the middle, and I think fatherhood is more like there's some level of rapids always. Like it might be a level 1 where you could actually probably have a sandwich and still paddle and be fine. Like it's actually no problem. Where level 5 is you're holding on for dear life. You should be trained. You probably are going to fall out of the boat. You know, you got to know that ahead of time. I have never done above a level, I think 3 or 4 in whitewater rafting. And I've only been whitewater rafting a couple times, but I did go one time, Lawson, in Costa Rica, where we hit, I think it was a 3 with one moment where we had a 4, and we had this like 10-foot drop. And it was a blast. Like my boys and I still tell the story of when we did that. We've got great pictures. And man, I think a dad listening can relate to the idea that fatherhood is like coursing through a river. And sometimes you can see the rapids coming. You know, the river's pretty straight, and you can see, yep, look at that down there in 100 yards. We're going to be in that white water. Sometimes you come around a bend, and all of a sudden you are in the rapids. You didn't even know they were coming. You know, the way the rocks fell, that even masked the sound. You couldn't hear it coming. And then you find yourself all of a sudden with, you know, the guy on the boat barking out commands, paddle left, paddle right, backward, forward, you know, and you're trying to navigate a really tricky season as a dad. And I bet we're catching dads at every stage of those rapids. You know, some guy listening is in a level 1, and he's like, yeah, it's pretty smooth sailing right now. And some guy listening right now is in the middle of a 5, and he's just trying to hang on for dear life.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had moments like that as a dad?
I think it's a really cool analogy. I used to, in college, worked at a camp for kids, a high adventure camp for kids. And one of a couple days in there, we would go to the Ocoee River in North Georgia and do whitewater rapids. I've done it with the family. I used to take a men's Bible study guys trip to West Virginia and go down place. It was actually called Class 6, which was the name of the company, but there was no Class 6.
Well, they were just
like
trying be cool.
Huh?
They were trying to
Yeah,
be
they were
cool.
trying to be
Like
cool.
anybody can be
Yeah,
class
and
five.
I think the Roman numeral V1 looked cool on their logo. So
Maybe they didn't know Roman numerals very well, and they put it on and went, "Oh shoot, man! I thought that was 5."
yeah, the guy
No,
was like,
Bobby,
put
that's a
class
6.
V. And so he thought, okay, VI.
Who knows?
Yeah.
If you're with
But
Class 6 Rapids, please call us.
no, I think you're right. I think there's like well, first of all, there is no such thing as class 0. I don't think. If there is, it's like maybe while you're asleep, um, where things are perfectly calm. So in my life, in my experience anyway, if you're looking for that class 0 to come,
Mm,
don't wait on it. Like it's not going to just be perfectly still and smooth and easy. Um, I think in this analogy, 1 is not so still. It's you're moving along. You kind of got to keep your eye out still. It doesn't mean that there's no danger either.
mm,
I've been floating along with the kids, and you reach this point, and the guide with us was like, okay, this is kind of where you guys can jump on in if you want and cool off. And it's beautiful, clear water and nice, and you're just floating along. You got your life vest on, and the kids are loving life. Um, but you have to be careful where you jump in. You don't want to hit
mm.
a log that's kind of beneath the surface that you couldn't see,
Yeah.
or a stump or something sticking up. You still got to be careful,
Mm-hmm.
and you're still moving. Life is still happening. You got to be aware, and like a 5 is super rough and crazy, and
Mm,
people die. And those things in life, it's life, and even Jesus said there's going to be trouble. So I think equating it like we've done is a good thought process. I loved having a guide who had been down the river before,
mm,
and so he's on the back going, all right, guys, let's make sure you've got your foot anchored in, and we're
mm.
coming up. As soon as we round this corner, we're going to see there's going to be a big rock off to the right, and right at that rock we're going to hit the left side because we don't want to go
Yeah.
right. And it's like it's reassuring. Most people don't just go buy a raft or a kayak and just go
Just
find
start.
some river and jump in. I mean, that's like pretty dangerous.
When
It's
we were
great to have somebody with you that knows what they're doing.
when we were in Costa Rica, our guide was named Fabian, and Fabian was obviously extremely comfortable in his job. In fact, when he pulled his boat up to the edge of the river and we were about to get in, he goes, "Hey, welcome to my office." And he had jokes. He cracked jokes. Like at one point, one of my boys asked if there were crocodiles in this river or alligators. I can't remember. And he said, "No, the piranhas always eat them." And he was,
what a great line.
he was
Yeah.
hilarious. And so at one point, I'd have to go back and ask him, but I'm pretty sure he dumped me on purpose. Like for sure.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
Oh man, we went around a turn and he's behind me and I'm like right next to him on his right. And at one point I'm just like, whoop, and I'm in the water and he's laughing and I'm pretty sure he pushed down and like had me fall over at the right time. And he's like, "Okay, Papa, back in the boat," and it was so entertaining and so fun, but it was because he knew his stuff. Like he was not concerned or freaked out. You could tell he'd been on this river 1,000 times. And even though we went through some, really challenging things for us as inexperienced rafters, nothing caught him by surprise. And
Yeah.
Immediately as a dad, I think of the verse in scripture, 1 Peter 4:12. I had to go look it up. It says, "Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you." And Peter's saying, "Look, don't be shocked. Don't be shocked." And he says, "But rejoice inasmuch as you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed." And he's saying, don't be shocked when the river turns into rapids like 3, 4s, and 5s. That's going to happen. And you put something in our show notes that I think is really interesting and gets a lot of people caught. And you said that class 3 rapids as a dad may not be dangerous, but if you're in them long enough, it can be exhausting. It can be exhausting. And I would say there have been moments, and kind of we're in one right now in our family where we have some health challenges, and they've been around so long that it feels like we've been fighting this river for a really long time. And it's not like, super like death related. It's not like someone's going to die. It's not dramatic, but it's painful enough where it's like continued for months and months. And I think it's hard sometimes as a dad or as a husband to realize how much of a storm you've been in, how much of a rapid you've been navigating, for how long you've been navigating it, until you hit really peaceful water. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You eventually hit some peaceful
true.
water and you look back and go, golly, we were in there for miles. That seemed to go on and on.
Yeah. The rapids analogy kind of runs its course a little bit, when you start taking it seriously, because going down rapids, when you have planned it and you've paid for it and you've got a guide, that's fun. You come out the other end and it's like everybody's high-fiving and you're wet and exhilarated, but in real life, you go down a class 3 and it's somebody lost their job, or something really unexpected, illness wise. I remember this was a while back, but Audrey, my wife, she has ulcerative colitis, and she caught shingles, and it was like all up her leg, and man, she was already having a tough time. And if you've ever had shingles, I never have, knock on wood, but talked to enough people and saw her, and it's awful. And so that period of time lasted like months. She lost, just all energy, and then the shingles was painful, and it messes. It's like a nervous system thing, so it's all related. And so that was a super hard, gosh, four or more months. And it wasn't, like you said, no one died. It wasn't a critical terminal kind of thing, but it lasted so long, and it was like this constant. And so I think, I submit that sometimes that is really tough to get through. On the other hand, I have this lady that I work with, Amy. She went like from a level 1 or level 2 to an immediate unexpected 5 when her son went missing and was found later, literally in a river. He had passed away and had a bad driving accident, and it was just,
man, that's terrible.
It was so bad. It was so awful. And what can you do for someone that's experiencing that, except just kind of be right there, and just let them know you have nothing to say, and you don't know what to do to help, but you're just standing right here. And fortunately, the team that she manages is, they've been together for a long time. They all know each other really well. They truly are like a tight family. So that helped. But dude, God worked in her life in a way that, it I don't want to even say that it strengthened her faith, but it sure did reveal it.
Yeah.
And I've seen in other times where something like that has happened, and the person that is dealing with it, that just went off a cliff, and the river just went right down a waterfall unexpectedly, and they somehow come through it and say, I didn't get through that of my own power. Like God provides what we need. He provides himself in the way that we need it when we get to that point. And I'm super thankful to have seen that happen for her. She's still going through it, but he was there for and with her. And I'm just so thankful that when we do hit a class 5 or a class 6, even waterfall moment, it's like, I remember the scripture where, God says, I won't put you through something that you can't bear. and I am with you always. And so, because here's where my thought kind of began was, I wouldn't say I'm in a level 1 right now, probably level 2, kind of constant, steady. Um, but I fight this kind of anxiety a little bit to say, oh, it's 2's not bad. I've got this. Like, I'm even good to let's just keep this at a 2, God. But man, I sure hope there's not like a 4 or 5 around the corner. I hope, is there? Please, if there is, oh my gosh, what could it be? Like I've got a daughter that's thousands of miles away, on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean sometimes, and there's nothing I could. That's sort of it's a helpless as a dad feeling. I know I'm not. I mean, God's got her,
Sure,
and I know that. But remember when we were talking to Craig Bowler, and I said, the question was like, how do you deal with that? How do you not worry about your kids? And he said something I thought was great. He said, it's real easy for me to not worry about your kids, Lawson. Like I can turn them over to God real easily, but turning my own children over is something that I struggle with. And so, if you're in a 1 or a 2 and the kids are floating around, swimming around the boat, and it's just the sun's out and the water's clear and you're kind of easing along. What do you do? What do you, I'm asking you, like, what do you think? How do you not think or worry about tomorrow?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you make me think of Matthew 6 when Jesus said, hey, God cares about the lilies of the field and the birds of the air. Doesn't he care more about you? And so don't worry about tomorrow, for each day has enough trouble of its own. And I know that's easy to say out loud if you don't have some big thing looming off in the distance, but that's the command, right? Don't be anxious. By everything in prayer and supplication, make your request known to God, and he will give you a peace that passes understanding. And there are things that I think when we're in the rapids, there are anchors we can hold on to. I think of even the boat. I'm playing back that memory of having gone down that river in Costa Rica, and I'm thinking of there were moments when Fabian said, "Paddle down," and he literally had the boat. Right, there were moments when he didn't want us paddling. He didn't want us doing anything. In fact, our activity would probably make it worse. We would do something wrong. So he would say, paddle down, and you would just hold your paddle across your lap, and he would navigate a certain section of the river all by himself. And I just remember that vividly, where sometimes we're trying to navigate our own problems, and we're paddling and screaming and barking out commands and doing things, and God's going, hey man, paddle down. Like if you would just set your paddle down, I will help you through this stretch of the river.
Love that.
And you paddling and flailing around sure ain't making it any better. You brought a scripture into our show notes for today, and I want to touch on that scripture because it's so valuable on so many levels. And it's 2 Corinthians 1:3-4. Blessed be the God of the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in our affliction so that we can just sit around and do nothing. No, it says comforts us in our affliction so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. And so God takes us through these afflictions, right? And he's comforting us during those so that later we can help other people. And so I'll keep going back to this guy, right? Fabian, he was so easy to follow because it was clear nothing really shocked him or surprised him. And for us, so this lady who lost her son, if someone were to lose a child, and I've had friends who have, I'm not of a high degree of comfort to them in the sense that I don't know exactly what they're going through. I've never gone through that exact thing. But this lady you mentioned has. And so she would be able to extend comfort to someone who lost a child probably better than I could. And there may be other things where I've been fired twice from jobs. So if somebody gets, I'm like a halfway house for dudes looking for their next career. I can't tell you how many cups of coffee I've had with people who have either lost their job or about to lose their job. And part of it is because God's brought me these people because I've had that happen to me. I had a friend of mine call me last December or November, and I'm walking in Dallas and my phone rings and it's one of my good friends. And I answer it and he goes, "Hey, man, my last day is in 2 weeks." And it was sudden. He was not in a financial position where that was comfortable. It was shot. And I said, "All right, man, let's battle plan. Here's our battle plan." We met for lunch a couple times. He's emailing me and I helped him navigate that whitewater stretch of his life, not because I had all the answers, but because I had just been in that particular stretch before. And I knew what that current felt like. And I knew what those rocks felt like. And I knew that it was going to be okay. And there's good water on the other side. And he came out fine, right? Not fine, but he landed a new gig. And so I think it's so valuable for us as dads to keep in mind that as we're going through these trials, as my friend Greg has told me, don't forget what God's trying to do to the mechanic. Like you got your hands in the machine, but don't forget what God's trying to do to the mechanic. And the fact that you have lost your job, dealt with health challenges, had conflict in your marriage, figured out difficult bosses or whatever trials you've had to go through, whatever rapids you've had to navigate, they're not just so you can get to the end and hold up the golden chalice and go, "Hey, look, I win." They are so that you can go back upriver and help people who are trying to navigate those same rapids, namely your own family, namely your wife and children, in the sense that when my boys are walking through situations, I got a young married son and he's in his young married years. And if he has questions about that, I don't have all the answers, but I have at least been in that position, right? If they've lost their jobs or if they're dealing with tension at work or if they're trying to figure out how to get out of debt or manage money, I've been down those roads. And so for me, the comfort with which God gave me, I'm now to extend that to other people. So thanks for bringing that 2 Corinthians scripture to bear today, Lawson, because
it's dead on.
It's so important.
Sometimes I think God, well, he says, I use all things for good. I told you guys about Amy, but I've also got another friend who, I don't know, years and years ago, it's a very similar thing happened. She now actually lives close enough that every now and then she and I will go get lunch. And we're having lunch next week. And I'm going to tell her about Amy and try to connect those two, because no one except a mother who has gone through it is going to be able to, to be there in a way that for Amy may help and may not. I don't know. They don't know each other, but I'm at least going to, bring it up and see what they say, and, see if they're interested in connecting. Whitewater rapids can be navigated. Like there's a way. Like your guy, what did you say his name was? Fabian. The guy that I remember back.
Or if you want to really Americanize it, it's Fabian. If you're like 1970s era, like smooth back hair with the white shirt and cigarettes rolled up in the sleeve, Fabian. He was amazing.
I had a buddy back then. His name was Boone, and he was from Boone, North Carolina. I was like, your parents named you after where you were born? But he was great too. But those guys know how to. They know how to navigate it. And there are things that you can see, and there are things unseen in the water currents. And the currents are moving all around obstacles. Water finds that path of least resistance. And so sometimes when you are in the rapids, whether you're in a kayak or in a raft, or you've fallen out and you're floating, the thing to do is go with the flow. Other times, like you said, it's paddle down and let someone that knows what they're doing get you through it. Sometimes you flip over and you feel even more on your own. You're out of the boat and you feel helpless and unsafe. But you know what? Sometimes the right thing to do is paddle like crazy across the current and pick a target. Even like with the current, paddle with the current as hard as you can to pick up speed, to get through something with a little bit more force. And then what I think is interesting, I'd love to get your reaction to this, is sometimes the guide would purposefully hit a rock, like some big rock in the, in the path. He would instruct us, like, speed up all ahead, and we would paddle as hard as we could right into a rock, so that it would like grab the front of the boat and then just kind of drag, so that we moved around something in a way that was really kind of the only good maneuver. Going into it head on was not right. Going sideways, certainly not right. And so maybe we don't see it, but with God as our guide, we do hit this really hard rock, and it feels like it just totally knocked us off course. But he's got a plan, and he knows why he's wanting that to happen. And then later on, like in the case of when I was in the raft, those times, it happens. You go through it, you get down, and you go, oh, I see why that happened. That was smart. That was really cool how we did that. And I mean, look, I'm not trying to make light of some major instance that happens in someone's real life, but the point is,
well, and to be fair to your point, there are some times when we have class 5 and they are dramatic, life altering, tragic. However, most of our lives are going to be dominated by classes 2 and 3. And our reaction to those classes can either make them better or worse. And so the bell curve is, will there be pain and trouble? For sure. Jesus said you're going to have it. We all know we're going to have it. It's not always going to be as dramatic as the loss of a family member. It might be, the other day I was literally working on something in our home, and I wasn't very skilled at it. And so the way I did it made it harder. And then I'm chipping this concrete off of this thing, and I made it harder by the way I went about it. And then I got angry, and I'm like griping about it, which doesn't make it any better, right? I'm not making it any better. I took a class 1 or class 2, and by my reaction, turned it into a class 3, right? Literally made a mountain out of a molehill. And I do think, while I don't want to discount the ultra tragic, I do want to say most of us are probably navigating classes 2 and 3 most of the time, and how we react to them and how we handle them either makes them smoother and easier to go through, or more difficult and more painful to go through. And as you and I have pointed out, a skilled guide, in the boat. And I think there's 2 ways of looking at that metaphorically, right? One is, for our families, sometimes we need to be that skilled guide. Hey guys, it's going to be okay. We're going to figure this out. We're going to batten the hatches. We're going to tighten the belt. We're going to pull back in. We're going to stop going to that thing. We're going to take that off the plate. You're making decisions as the leader of your family to try and bring equilibrium back to the boat, because you're in charge of navigating, your family through this river. The other side of that metaphor, though, is the real captain of the boat is God. The real captain of the boat is the Holy Spirit. And that is, are we in submission to him? I like to think of it like I'm really not the guy in the back, the captain. Usually a rafting guide sits in the back, and he's got control of the back of the boat because he can steer better. And usually that's where the rafting guide would sit. And I like to think that's God. And I'm just sitting right next to him, and I'm just trying to listen really carefully to how he tells me what to do with my family. I'm not in total charge. I'm not sovereign. I'm not in control of the future. However, I'm in a boat where I do know the guy who is in control of the future. And for me, if I can just listen to him really well, I won't turn, level 2 rapids into class 3 rapids. In fact, maybe the opposite. I've been around guys, like there's a guy in California named John, and we've developed a Zoom relationship where we talk every quarter or so. And he's farther ahead of me in terms of every business metric you can measure, manage bigger teams, bigger budgets, more complex things. And he's a few years ahead of me in terms of age. And when I talk to him, I just feel like whatever level of tension I had when I started talking to him, by the time I'm done talking to him, it's gone down a level or 2. He is a calming influence. And I'll ask him complicated questions about strategy and money and different things. And he'll just kind of go, yeah, that's a good question. Couple things you might think about as you're wrestling, and just the way he communicates and everything just takes things down a notch. And what's funny is I'm kind of the opposite. I usually make things worse by my initial reaction. And my family has great funny stories about several times when I've done that. And for me, I'm in the learning process of learning how to not let the rapids scare me, how to navigate them the best I can, how to come back upstream and help others through the same stretch of rapids I have maybe navigated, and not to fear what's around the corner.
That's a good reminder for us as dads to our kids. The last thing any of us would do is take a child that doesn't yet really know how to swim very well and has never been rafting in down a river and just strap them into a kayak and push them off. We we practice in a calm lake. We show them the basics and the fundamentals, and then maybe together, you go and do something in a little bit of water that's moving. And like I'm thinking about, for some reason, like a middle schooler, just because that's a tough time. That is they are really kind of beginning to get out of a calm lake or a pond and into some moving water, and as a middle schooler, you dads that have middle schoolers, I vividly remember, especially with, well, I don't know about especially with girls, all I had was girls, but for girls, man, they can be judgmental and mean and critical, and a lot of comparing, especially today with social media, a lot of sizing up, and this person's doing this or has this and you don't. And it just, middle school, you've got things changing with your body, and so it's just a tough time. I would say that's a strong level 3 rapid, that your kid is going through. And so before that, and maybe even during, maybe you got to kind of get in the boat with them a bit, and there you both go down the river and you're learning level 3 in a new way. Never had a middle schooler before. But there are things that we can do. There's safety measures. You wear a helmet, a flotation jacket, gloves, maybe some foot coverings, because the bottom of the river is rocks and you don't want to stub a toe. There are some things that we can take into account to help our kids prepare and to get them ready and think about things in advance and be, like you said, what was that guy's name that you mentioned? No.
Fabian.
Yeah.
Or John out in California.
I want my kids to come to me in the middle of a rapid because they know that I'm going to be a calming influence. I'm not going to make it worse. So we as dads, maybe something happened to us in our childhood that we can relate. Maybe we're going through something today that we can relate to that middle schooler that's having some problem with a bully, or somebody that's has something they don't, that they wish they had, or maybe they're not able to keep up, or not doing great on a test and they feel like they're failing or something like that. And so relating to them and bringing it down from a level 3, let's realize, let's look at this together. I'm right here with you. Pray about it together, and just doing some of that, I think, helps calm the situation versus, oh man, I can't believe this is so bad. Let me go. And then you just go storming into the school, and take on a teacher or a principal or some other parent, that's just going to make it worse.
Right. Well, what's interesting, Lawson, is there are times when, because we don't have all the answers, we don't know everything, obviously. However, we might have had some of these experiences before. I remember there was a moment or two, and I'm piecing together 2 or 3 different rafting trips, but where the guides would tell me, hey, here's where we don't want to end up. Well, just as we go down this one curve, everything's fine. Everything's in bounds, except that one rock over there. Because behind that rock, there's the water curled in a way that you just get stuck in it. Now, you're probably not going to die, but he's like, we don't want to end up there. And if you fall out of the boat there, it can be really hard to get back above water. So there were like little danger spots down the river, not hundreds, but a handful, where the guide would say, here's what we want to do. and it gave you, it's like when Jesus said, in this world, you will have trouble. They are going to persecute you. You think they persecuted me? Wait till they get a hold of you. Like, Jesus told his disciples this for several reasons, one of which is to prove his deity, but another was so that they wouldn't be shocked and thrown off balance when it happened. And so when the guide tells you, hey man, watch out for that rock, we're going to steer clear of that one on the right, not only are you safer, but you even place additional emphasis, not emphasis is the wrong word. You place additional confidence in the guide when he helps you avoid trouble spots. And so for the dad out there parenting a middle schooler, high schooler, teenager, I want to give this dad kind of a closing thought, because how we tee up that caution or warning or counsel often determines whether it's received.
Hey, quick.
Let me go back and say that again.
Well, hang on. Quick point is, it also helps when you look back at the guide, he's not freaking out. He's calm.
Right. Fair.
But say that again.
What I'm saying is, how often a dad will come to me either through email or somehow inbound text or something, and I get a hold of a dad who says, my teenager won't listen to me. And often, I will say often, it is because that dad has forgotten to parent his teenager differently than he parented his 9-year-old. So what's happening is, when your child is 8 or 9, you just give them commands and directives, and what you say is gospel truth, and they just trust you. And so you say do X, and they go do X, and you do that. So, but when they're teenagers, I found something super, super helpful with my boys. I tried to take the words have to or must out of my vocabulary and replace them with words like consider or think about. And so, yeah, they have to be home by midnight, or they do have to show their mom respect. There's commands, there's boundaries. But what I found was, often my kids would have to make a choice where one choice might be a little more risky or a little more problematic, but it wasn't outright evil. It came with some danger. It came with some challenge. And what I would say to them, instead of, hey, you have to pick path A, actually, they don't. They can choose to lie. They can choose to hide that thing. They can choose to wear their outer clothing, and then when they get out in public, change to their outfit they want everyone to see them in. Like, they can choose all that. They don't have to not choose that. Now, there may be consequences, but here's what I found. What I found was, if I were to say to them, you basically have two choices here. You can either do thing A or thing B. And my job as your dad is to give you what I think would be the wiser of the two choices, but let you know just what are the risk areas behind these two doors. And then you're going to decide. And I'm not going to hold your decision against you. You're going to decide. Because what I'm in the process of doing is replacing myself as their decision maker. I want to get out of the business of making every decision for them, because by the time they go to high school or college, for sure, they're going to be presented with way too many choices for them to call me every 8 seconds. I can't live in 5 lives. They've got to learn how to make decisions. And so my job is to help them understand the ramifications or the risks in an area and say, hey, look, you can paddle over into that, eddy, that swirl. But let me tell you what's going to happen if you paddle into that eddy. You're going to be stuck there, and you will not know how to get out, and it will take you an hour, and you'll be exhausted, and you do run the slight risk of drowning. You probably won't, but it's going to be rough. If you, however, paddle around that eddy, let me tell you what's going to happen. Now, here's the paddle. Best of luck. You decide. Now, I'm not talking about them driving off a cliff or, taking illicit drugs or robbing a bank. I mean, there's rules. I get it. But I'm saying dads often get into that dictatorial communication style, and they never leave it as their kids get into the teen years. And they think the problem is the teen doesn't listen. Maybe. Often the problem is you're not coaching them. You're not counseling them. You're commanding them. And so as a good boat captain, let's give them commands when they're in danger. But when there are choices to be made, let's let them make some choices under our watchful eye and not be so must and have to and got to type language. And that just worked really well for my boys. I don't know if that works well for girls, Lawson. You can speak into that. But as we close today, I just want dads to know, don't be scared by the rapids that you're in. They don't surprise God. They're not shocking. And over time, they'll probably surprise you less and less. And as you navigate them, just remember that, to Lawson's point a minute ago, when they look back at you as the captain, if you look freaked out and panicked, they're probably going to look freaked out and panicked. So as a dad, let's not be shocked by the fiery ordeals that come on us, but instead let's put our faith and trust in Jesus Christ, who says he will never leave us or forsake us. Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful, remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call a person up and tell them to listen in. Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week.